And the next speaker we have is Aikaterina Manoli. The title of her talk is The Developing Social Cerebellum. Cerebellum supports two systems of theory of mind and development. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Aikaterina. I'm a PhD student at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Germany. And today I will talk to you about how the cerebellum supports two different systems of theory of mind in development. So I have no disclosures. Why even care about the cerebellum? Well, even though it's traditionally considered a motor brain region, it is actually involved in a wide range of cognitive processes, both in terms of functional activations in motor and association tasks, but also in terms of extensive connectivity with motor and association regions of the cerebral cortex. And in terms of connectivity, the prominent theory is that the cerebellum is involved in predictive processing by generating and storing internal mental models of different cognitive functions, and then feeding them forward to the cortex to aid in behavior optimization. And here we were interested in one particular facet of behavior or cognition, which is social cognition, and more specifically theory of mind, which is our ability to infer the mental states of other people, for example, their desires or beliefs. In the cerebral cortex, theory of mind processing consistently recruits a widespread network of frontal, temporal, and parietal regions, which is called the theory of mind network. However, recent research in adult population has shown that the posterior cerebellum, and more specifically CRUS 1 and 2, are also heavily involved in theory of mind processing. And recently, we showed that in development, functional changes in the posterior cerebellum support the emergence or development of theory of mind around the 4th year of life. So for example, here you can see that children that passed the theory of mind task outside, which was done outside of the scanner, demonstrated functional activations in the posterior cerebellum, which were absent in children who did not yet pass these tasks. And interestingly, these activations were also consistent with theory of mind activations in the cerebellum of adults. And another interesting finding was that when comparing children and adults in terms of task-based connectivity, we found that in children, most connections emerged from the cerebellum and ended in the cerebral cortex in the theory of mind network, whereas in adults we observed an opposite pattern, which might suggest that all of these emergent connections from the cerebellum early in life might help set the stage for theory of mind development in the first years of life. However, this is not the full picture. So far, we have shown how the cerebellum might help with the emergence of theory of mind around the 4th year of life, which is when children are typically able to verbally or explicitly point out the mental states of another person. However, if you have interacted with an infant or a toddler, you know that they also have some social abilities. For example, they're capable of joint attention, which is the ability to follow your gaze or your finger if you're pointing at something, or social referencing, which is their ability to change their behavior according to the emotional expressions or the facial expressions of other people around them. And this might mean that there might be different stages of the developing social understanding in theory of mind. And one is the classic theory of mind processing, which, as I mentioned before, is verbal and emerges typically around the 4th year of life. But there might also be theory of mind precursors, which are nonverbal and are present much earlier. And interestingly, these two different systems are associated with distinct regions in the cerebral cortex. So classic theory of mind in development is associated with surface area increases in the temporoparietal junction and the precuneus, which are parts of the classic theory of mind network, whereas the theory of mind precursors are actually associated more with the salience network, and specifically surface area increases in the supramarginal gyrus, which is more involved in attention and action observation. So this raises the exciting question of how might the cerebellum also support these different stages of theory of mind development, and that's what we aim to do here. We used openly available or previously collected data, and specifically T1 weighted images of children across 2 different data sets for each theory of mind stage, because it was important for us to see if we can generalize our results. In terms of tasks, so for classic theory of mind processing, we used a false belief task where children were asked to explicitly point out a false belief in a character in the context of a story, and for more specifically, a false belief about an object's location, whereas for the theory of mind precursors, we used an anticipatory-looking eye tracking task where children had to predict a person's next move based on their mental states, and also joint attention paradigm during free play with a caretaker. For analyses, we did voxel-based morphometry as the function of each theory of mind score, both in the entire cerebellar cortex, but also because we had these functional activations that I showed you before, we also used them as a priori ROIs. And we also calculated the covariance with a theory of mind network of the cerebral cortex. So here are the results, starting off with classic theory of mind processes. Here we saw volumetric increases which were consistent across the two data sets and were present in the posterior cruise 1 and 2 as a function of theory of mind score. And all of these analyses were controlled for age, sex, IQ, and children's linguistic and executive functions. And we were able to partially replicate our functional findings in structure with a priori ROIs, where we only observed volumetric increases in the a priori cruise 2. Moving on to the theory of mind precursors, here we observed volumetric increases in lobule 7 and the vermis as a function of that theory of mind score. Again, very consistent across the two data sets and also controlled for age, sex, IQ, and linguistic and executive functions. And interestingly, this means that we're observing changes in non-overlapping regions for the different theory of mind stages, which was very interesting for us to see. And lastly, in terms of covariance, we also observed increased structural covariance between the cerebellar our theory of mind regions and the volumes of the theory of mind network. Here I have the right TPJ as an example. And in the pink line, you can see that as theory of mind score increases, at least in classic theory of mind processing, so does covariance with the RTPJ. So in conclusion, we observed distinct volumetric changes in the cerebellum for theory of mind development, where classic or adult-like theory of mind processing recruited regions cruise 1 and 2, which are also present in adult theory of mind, whereas the precursors recruited lobule 7 and the vermis, which are more involved, at least in the adult cerebellum, in attention and action observation. And this is a pattern that mirrors the development of theory of mind in the cerebral cortex. So again, classic theory of mind is associated with the temporoparietal junction and the precuneus, which are classic regions of the theory of mind network, whereas the precursors are associated with the supramarginal gyrus, which again is involved in attention and action observation. The fact that we observed increased covariance between the cerebellum and the cerebral theory of mind network could suggest some co-maturation processing going on between these circuits during theory of mind development. And these findings raise some exciting future directions, specifically the examination of mechanisms of cerebrocerebellar interaction for these two different theory of mind stages, especially if theory of mind in the cerebellum is particularly important in development. And lastly, the effect of different neurodevelopmental disorders, such as autism, which might affect these two systems differently. Thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to also particularly thank my student, Nilsu, who did most of this work, and also all the participants in the openly available data. Thank you.
I'm really interested with the cerebellum idea, and I think with cerebellum it has involved in so many aspects, but I'm just curious about the fact that how does the system of the cerebellum connects with the system like brainstem regions or even the thalamus to an extent?
Yes, so I don't think there's a lot of research on that, especially in development. All we know is like the CTC tract, the cerebellum, thalamus, cortex tract, based on diffusion studies. But I think especially like in cognition, like to figure out how all of these systems interact for cognitive processes would be super interesting, and I would love to collaborate, so let me know.
I have another question here in that case. In the VBM model, did you control for global normalization values, i.e. total cranial volume, as this is a developmental study? This would be important to control.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Is that time?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I'll run up again.
Yes, getting your steps in.
Yeah, great. That was great. First time also seeing these results, and I think they're super cool. I'm wondering kind of like what you make of these vermal activations, kind of like in the theory of mind precursors, especially, kind of because this is before language also has this onset, right? Mm-hmm. Is there anything like related to, because there's also lots of emotion behaviors in this region, right? Like, is there anything you make of these activations in there?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So there's not much about the developing vermis in the cerebellum, but what we know based on, for example, Maeve King's work or other functional activations, it's more part of like the salience network in the cerebellum. So it's like attention, action, observation, and it also connects to these regions. But of course, I'm not sure like what exactly this could mean, because I think vermis is also associated with emotion and like other processes. Did you also mention motion?
Sorry?
Did you also mention motion correction?
No,
Is what it is. Okay.
emotion, sorry.
Oh,
because
emotion.
it's such a, right, like kind of like the classical kind of vermal structure is kind of like emotion.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this
yeah.
kind
No,
of stuff.
that was interesting for us too. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Okay. Once again, let's thank Katerina.